I'm super happy to be with you today. My name is Shaun Dix. I lead creative excellence at Ipsos, basically everything to do with advertising research. Thank you very much for letting me talk today. I have the privilege of speaking to you today about the hottest topic in advertising today. And the title of my presentation is going to be called Misfits and the Machine, and why AI alone cannot crack creative effectiveness. So let's get started. So what do we know? We did a study at Ipsos with corporate communication leaders around the world in about 23 countries. And we asked those leaders, or what the finding that we got rather from that learning or that study is that AI will absolutely transform the way that we are doing our business today. And most of them said, almost 90% of them said that they are set for huge change. For the advertising ecosystem, this change is massive. And McKinsey has estimated that as much as $500 billion will be saved through efficiencies, production efficiencies, and the use of AI. P&G just a couple of weeks ago, I think a month and a half ago, were saying themselves that they will realize a saving of as much as $700 million US in production efficiencies and in film, but they did say they would reinvest it into reach, effectiveness, and advertising. But this, of course, is changing the advertising agency model completely, is what they alluded to. So really, really interesting to see this kind of data. But because we're going to talk about advertising today and creativity and AI, I thought we can't start the presentation without showing you some ads. So I'm going to show you two ads. The first one, some of you may have seen, but some of you may not. So let's have a look at it.
Pietro always had a flexible neck, just like his father and his very curious grandfather. All of the men from the Pisanos had this gift. This talent earned them fame in the village, even if it might not have been completely true. At 18, Pietro became a tennis judge, which was at least safer than his cousin doing neck tricks at the local circus, and less tiring than his nephew. Well, never mind. Older women were just laughing about it. Younger women were curious, naive, and idolizing. Many people argued about how the Pisanos did it. Some suspected special exercises. Some talked about genetics. But what no one knew is that the street in front of the Pisanos led to the home of Herr Weber, who in his adventurous years made his fortune by importing alpacas to Germany. But this would be an entirely different story. After retiring in Italy, through all the decades, he kept buying the best sports cars available from Gianni, who became a friend until the very end. When Weber went for a spirited ride, he did it right in front of the Pisanos' house. Porsche, turning heads for generations.
So that's the first one. Let's look at one more.
Pietro always had a flexible neck.
The second one coming up.
Tis the season for a shout. Look around, something's coming, coming to town. Can you see it shining bright? Holiday refreshments, what we bring. Tis the season, it's always the real thing.
So that ad was released in November last year, just before the Christmas season. And well, you can see by the polar bear's face here, he's very sad. And that's because basically the media and all of the LinkedIn experts fried this ad. They said, how could Coca-Cola do this and use AI for the real thing or for Christmas? In fact, you can see from some of the headlines I chose here that there was a lot of controversy surrounding this ad that was created by AI. Or even some went on to even propose or proposition that there is a new culture war brewing, and Coca-Cola's AI Christmas ad is at the center of this. One of the ones that I saw, and you may have seen this, is what went wrong with Coca-Cola's AI ad. And I can tell you that the comments on LinkedIn were also quite vicious. And you can see this final one saying Coca-Cola's creepy dystopian nightmare. So very, very, very negative feedback because people in the industry had learned that this ad was created by AI. So what we know about this is that actually this Coca-Cola ad has done quite well. And we released and we contributed to an article in the Wall Street Journal that was released on the 25th of November last year. And my colleague, Ped Howard, who leads creative excellence in the US, was quoted speaking about this and said, of course, the company Coca-Cola has been using computer-generated polar bears and penguins in ads over the years. In fact, since 1995, that original Coke ad was aired in 1995. So the fact that it lends itself to AI and that it's being produced to AI, the average person on the street, normal consumers, everyday people won't know the difference, and they don't really care. It's only us professionals who are very subjective in our point of view and tend to think, get the jury out on this ad when this is not really the case. And what we see here is that even if it's being created like this, the ad actually does really, really well. In fact, you can see that from the data on the screen here. We have a creative effect potential score, which is a sum of brand attention and equity or behavior change of 142. And what that index says is that it's way above average when we compare ourselves to the US database of ads that we test. So that's a really great score, good score for equity. So in fact, the ad does really well. And it just shows that we shouldn't judge something before actually testing it with real people. But I guess the question you may have, as I alluded to the title of my presentation, Misfits and Machines, is can machines or can AI produce really effective advertising? That example there that I just showed you, obviously for Coca-Cola, leverages distinctive brand assets that Coke has been using for many, many years, in fact, decades. And we've all become used to those DVAs, those distinctive brand assets that allow our brain to associate that kind of advertising with the brand Coca-Cola. So it's a logical explanation. But the question is, if we don't even have that, or we're looking at other advertising, can it really be effective? So let's have a look at an example. I'll show you the ad and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So let's see the ad.
What if the universe baked a cookie and sent it hurtling through the cosmos? What if that cookie turned into a symphony of shooting stars, lighting up our world? And what if those stars turned into your favorite treat, falling like sweet snowflakes? What if each bite could hold a universe of flavors? What if we told you this isn't just a dream?
So this ad is an example of maximum production efficiency by handing over all of the tasks of ad development or creative development process to artificial intelligence. But it is important to say here that this isn't an ad made by the Oreo, or the official company that owns Oreo. It was actually produced by a YouTube creator who asked AI to make this Oreo commercial. And assume that most of you in the audience who are watching this or present right now have not seen this ad before. Let's see what happens with the results. And I'm sure you're bursting and wanting to know really how did this ad performed, because we did research with this ad and tested it in our best-in-class pre-testing solution, Creative Spark, and here are the results. So what you can see on the screen here is that, yes, of course, this creative is very unique in its way that it uses that computer-generated scenes, and even surprising. In fact, some of the people had 6 fingers. Who knew people could have 6 fingers? There you go. But AI made humans look a little bit different to what we know. And of course, you can see by the red circles around these bubbles in the Misfits mindset brain that we have a high level of confusion, which is 114%. But we can see that this ad isn't generating large associations with empathy and fitting in. So it doesn't fit the way that people feel about Oreo. It's not really credible or for people like them, and it's not informative or said something new. So the ad itself doesn't really perform well, and we can see from the results and the index scores, similar to what I showed you before, but here we have the opposite, 62 creative effect index, which means really it's a poor performance, in fact, way below the average and in weak zone. So that would be something we would watch out for, even though the brand attention is average at 101, because it is original and surprising, but it doesn't do anything for the equity of Oreo, nor is it going to be effective here. So here we can see is summed up by the verbatim on the screen. The ad was ridiculous, overblown, and not related at all to product. So we can see that, yes, we can use AI, but in some cases it might be really doing something crazy, and that's what we don't want to happen, is produce things that are not effective, and that will be completely ignored by everyday people out there. And so that's important to know. So, we have to ask ourselves, what are the opportunities and risks of using artificial intelligence for ad development? There are many. And I would say that we need to first explore Misfits. You saw the name on the presentation at the beginning of this presentation or talk. And the word Misfits is important to understand. When we talk about Misfits at Ipsos, yes, there is a connotation, there is the definition of being non-stereotypical or defying category conventions or category norms. That's what we mean by Misfits. But we don't align ourselves to the dictionary definition, which could mean something negative. In fact, we define Misfits as something that indeed is non-stereotypical, non-conforming, but that adds value to the end audience. And that's very important to just remember when we talk about Misfits here at Ipsos. And it's important because the data we have at Ipsos shows that advertising that is non-conforming, in other words, breaks category conventions or this culture of conformity, does much better on brand attention than those ads that just do the same thing over and over again. And so we published this book, which you can see here, which I just put up. It's called Misfits in 2022. It's a great book, and it's a perspective on how creativity and advertising can spark brand growth. If you're interested in having a copy, please talk to your local Ipsos person. We have a very easy way to ship it if you need one. But what this book does is it's a point of view on creativity and advertising that is backed up by data, backed up by research, backed up by case studies, and supported by EFI, the EFI organization, which you will know. And what we did, what you see on the left-hand side, which I've already introduced, is our Misfits mindset, our framework for looking at how creativity and advertising works when we look at ads. And we have 3 different buckets. The left-hand side is creative experiences, which defines basically anything that has to do with memory and coding. In other words, how advertising gets into people's minds or is remembered. So you can see the descriptions in this brain or red color of the brain is all to do with uniqueness, likability, talkability, surprise, entertainment, social, stirred emotions, right? We have on the right-hand side creative ideas, which is all about being informative, saying the brand is different or saying something new. And in the middle, the sweet spot is all about empathy and fitting in, which I explained earlier. And so we have some findings. We ran some of these little different buckets with our KPIs. And what you can see here is that in this analysis, we found that actually a high level of creativity and a high level of empathy will give you as much as a 20% lift in effectiveness when we look at our database of ads that we've tested on average. And that's for linear videos, so for TV and online video. So what that means is just having a high level of creativity and a low level of empathy won't necessarily give you a great level of effectiveness, but having both of these things, high creativity and high empathy, will give you better return on your investment and more effectiveness in the market. And just to say that for social media, that number goes up by another 20%. So for Instagram and Facebook, that lift is almost 20%. So it's even more important in social media advertising. So let's look at another example. This is an example where it's a perfect match of using human intelligence and AI to bring the Kraft Heinz love story with every bottle to life. So let's have a look at the ad. It's a great one, and I think Kraft Heinz have done a fantastic job of just making poking a little bit of fun at generative AI. So let's have a look at it. So I have to give the agency and the marketing teams a round of applause, because that's a fantastic example of just, using generative AI as a tool to kind of they had a great idea of saying, okay, what will generative AI say about ketchup? And obviously you've seen the example of that. So what they've done is they've showcased advertising experience of empathy and fitting in, and that in fact, if it's ketchup, it has to be Heinz. And so how did that do? Let's have a look at the results. Same, you have the Misfits mindset framework on the left-hand side of the slide here. And what you can see by the green circles around the different variables here that describe these different buckets that I explained earlier, you can see in creative experiences, which again has to do with memory encoding. We can see, all of those items, or most items, are higher than the country norm. Yeah, this is also the US, a very original ad, very entertaining, surprising. It's something people will talk about, has a place in popular culture, but also shows that on the creative ideas bucket, shows that the brand is different and definitely conjures up feelings of empathy, as we see in for people like me, and fits the way I feel about the brand. So you can see here, fits the way I feel about the brand is 25% higher than the norm. So really, really a great result. And you see in the creative effectiveness here that the score is 180, which is really, really high, and a great result for Kraft Heinz. And the verbatim, I think, sums it up really nicely. It made me want to make some fries and dip them in Heinz ketchup, which is phenomenal and what you want. So let's sum up with a few findings. What I've tried to show you today is that it's not one or the other, right? It's about blending human intelligence with artificial intelligence. But what we learned from these findings and our meta-analysis is that being more human is important. It gives us more connection. So AI can inspire creative experiences. We've seen that, but it needs to be led by human thinking right now. We also see that empathy is critical for brand impact through those examples I showed you today. And AI cannot yet alone replace HI in this area. Originality is important, so that comes from the human part. We still need human thinking to deliver original ideas that impact choice. And then, of course, AI is an enabler for us to impact those experiences. And we believe the future is really collaboration, and AI becomes a tool that we can use to make our campaigns effective. So I showed you an ad at the beginning of the presentation. This ad was called the Pacianos. It is, before we finalize this presentation, I wanted to share the results of this because this ad has been shared a lot online and been spoken about a lot at different events and people that I've bumped into. The ad was created by a guy who has nothing to do with Porsche. So again, he's a YouTuber or creator. He had the idea, of course, but he used a new tool from Google called VO2, which was totally produced by AI. There was nothing in there that was actually filmed. And I would encourage you to go and look up this ad, the Pacianos, because you can watch the ad again, but you can also watch the director's cut, which is how he created the what would be the film sets and everything with AI as well. So he created a whole reel at the back end of the ad with AI showing how they actually filmed it in this Italian village. So it's absolutely brilliant, and it just shows the power of where AI is going. We did evaluate this ad in our own AI tool, so Creative Spark AI, so AI judging AI. Maybe that's a little bit biased, but there we go. So we have the Pacianos Porsche ad, which really demonstrates a strong overall effectiveness. You see that from the 134, so just above average, and we can see not as strong on brand attention, and that's because there are a lot of scenes and cuts, but still not bad, average, and equity is very strong. So something to think about. That's where the industry is going, and I want to just thank you for listening to me today. If you have any interest in learning more about the publications that we've produced, we have a paper called Misfits in the Machine. My wonderful colleague, Diana Lidovic, who's here in Germany with me, she wrote the paper. That's available on our Ipsos Misfits website. If you send me a message on LinkedIn, I can share the paper with you directly. We have wonderful thought leadership there, and also have a paper on AI and advertising, where we talk about our perspective on the blend of HI and AI. Thank you very much for listening to me today, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and stay in touch.